Greetings, Guzzlers. I'm going to make some bread. I haven't made bread for a while. Certainly haven't made it in my new oven. And actually, this one's got a working light, so I'm hoping to use this properly as a bit of a proving oven. But anyway, we'll see. So the recipe I'm going to use is from the book Bake with Jack. It kept popping up in my Amazon sort of suggested reads and everything. And I kept thinking, well, I've got enough bread books, and then I thought, oh, sod it, you can never have enough bread books, can you? So I got it, and interestingly, I wouldn't say he puts a different spin on things, but some of the concepts that I've sort of struggled with things like sourdough and that, even reading some of the, books that are highly recommended, there's certain little bits you're never quite sure. And I must admit, I thought, well, I haven't tried any of these sourdough ones yet, well, this is the first one I'm doing, the first bread I'm doing. And I have to say, it sort of made a little bit more sense. So anyway, what we're going to make is Jack's olive, lemon and thyme rye ring. That's a mouthful, isn't it? So you're going to want some strong white bread flour, some rye flour, yeast, salt, warm water, and that's it for the bread. However, we will be adding some olives. I've got a selection of olives and some thyme, but we'll worry about that a bit later on. First thing we want to do is get the yeast going. Yeah, got to get your yeast going. So first off, I'm using dried yeast, active dried yeast, and I've got 5 grams of that, and I'll put that in that bowl. And then I'm going to add 250 grams of warm water, and then we're just going to let that sit for a while until that yeast has got going. Now, I said to you about the other things you want. The strong white bread flour, I've got 300 grams of that. I've got 75 grams of organic, as it happens, rye flour. I've got 6 grams of fine salt. And like I say, that's all you're going to need at this initial stage. Now, when we come to need it in a bit, we're not going to use any extra flour, but later we will need some flour, so I've left my flour out, because my flour tends to get a bit buried, and then I have to take everything out to get to it, so I've left it out. Now, the final sort of proving, as it were, we're going to do in a banneton, but it's going to be a little bit different, okay? I'm going to use the cloth, but I'm also going to be wanting a little mound in the middle. But anyway, that's a little way off, and you want a clean cloth in a minute. So let's just get that yeast going. So that's got that yeast all, I don't like saying dissolved, which is what he says do, because the yeast won't dissolve, but you get the idea. It's all sort of mixed in. Now we're now going to add in our flours, our salt, and then we're now just going to mix all that together until that's come together as a dough. So I've got that more or less mixed together, and like I say, although this might be a little bit sticky, let's get back in there, you little bugger. We don't want to add more flour, because that will result in too much flour being present. Remember, we've measured out the right quantities of flour. We don't want to end up overdoing it. It could make the bread rather dry. So I can't find my little plastic scraper. Probably the bloody missus put it somewhere. I don't bloody know what she's done with it. Now we'll keep the bowl, because we're going to need that, and we're now just going to need that because we're now going to need this for about 8 minutes. Now we're just going to knead it, like I say, on the surface, no extra flour. Keep it going, stretching it, folding it, and then it's going to go back in that bowl We're going to just cover it lightly and we're going to let it rest for about 5 to 10 minutes. Just like I say, just going to cover that over and it's going to rest about 10 minutes. Now while it's resting, we're going to prepare the fillings. So I've zested 1 lemon, I've got a generous 2 teaspoons of finely chopped thyme, and then I've got 120 olives. I've got a mixture of Kalamata or however you pronounce it, and then these sort of black olives. They look red to me, but I don't know. Essentially, you can use all of one or mixture, whatever you like. What I'm doing with these is I'm just going to tear these up, and then we're just going to mix all that together, and that will go back in that bowl, ready for when we then fill our dough. So, I think I said to you it's 120 grams of olives. I'm now taking my dough out of that bowl, and I've just put a little light dusting of flour down, and what we want to do is now essentially flatten this out into a circle, and you can use your knuckles if you like to make some indents, because when at this stage I'm going to put half of that filling, just torn a hole in it there, but never mind. So we're now just going to spread half of that filling all over it. And then you can press that down. Now we're just going to roll it all up into a sausage, as it were. We're going to turn it around that way, and now I just want to flatten it out again. And we're then going to spread the remainder of that on top of that, roll it up, and then shape it into a ball. So that's not going to spread out much more. So that's got that in there. Just going to spread that over a bit, and then like I say, we're now just going to roll that back up. Oops, forgot to press it down, never mind. Roll that back up. Doesn't matter if they're poking through. Now, that's going to go back in that bowl. What I do, just going to give it a little bit of a light dusting in there, and a little bit of a light dusting over the top. And we're now just going to cover that with that cloth again, and we're going to let it rise for about an hour to an hour and a half. So that's where I'm going to shove it in my oven and see how that gets on with just the light. And we're now just going to remove that, and we have theoretically finished with our bowl now. And what we want to do is just flatten it slightly and roll it into a rough sausage. And we're now just going to cover that, and we're going to leave that for about 10 minutes. Now, I said to you we're going to prove it in the banneton, and what I've got here is one of my round bannetons, but whereas normally I flour that and I put it directly into there and we just use that as a cover, what we're going to do this time is use, I've got a little Dario mould or anything that's about that sort of size. We essentially want to sit it in the middle because we're going to create a ring, and then I'm just going to put the cloth over the top. It's not quite big enough, this cloth. You can do it with a tea towel if you wanted, but this has just about got enough give in it that I can rest that like that, and so we can put the dough in there, and the idea being it will then help maintain a ring shape. Okay, So we're just leaving that about 10 minutes, and then we'll do the final shaping, and then it's going to want another proving. We don't need to put the oven on yet because we're going to prove for about another hour. Next is just take some flour, and we want to flour the inside of our banneton. We don't want, whoops, smash my starter. We don't want anything sticking in there. And then we're going to take our sausage and we want to roll it to about 20 inches long, because we're going to be wrapping it round to fit into that banneton. Now that's about 50 inches because I measured it. Okay, now if you've got a seam, remember when we turn it out, the top of that is going to be the bottom. So if there is a seam in it, which there isn't really in this one, then we're going to put it seam side up in there, if you like. So I've not added any extra flour, I've not needed any extra flour, and what we want to do is just cross it over like that. So we create our ring, and then I'm going to lift that up and plonk that into that basket like that. Okay, if you use too much flour on the bench when you roll it, you'll find that's not going to stick together. But what we are going to do now is just flour the surface, and that's going to get covered over, and we're going to leave that to prove for about 45 to 50 minutes. Now I'm going to do this on a baking stone, and so I can't put this back in the oven because I need to get my baking stone up to temperature. That can take a good hour. It's the same as if you're doing the bread cloche. Okay, so I've got my oven set for about 230 on fan, and that will give that time for that, not only for that to rise, but our baking stone to get nice and hot. So might need a little bit of flour for when it comes to transferring it onto the baking stone, so we'll leave that there. But there we are, final proving stage, and then we'll be ready to bake. Just boiled about half a kettle, and when I set my oven up, on the bottom I've put a deepish baking tray, and that water is going to go in there to create some steam in the oven. Now I've got a peel here, and I've got my lame or sharp knife, whatever you want to use. And what we're going to do at this point is remove that cloth, get that out of the way, and you can see that's risen up really nicely. And I'm just going to put some extra flour on the top there, because what we now want to do is turn that out onto our peel, and a little bit of stick in there. We'll worry about that in a bit, but there you go. And now I'm going to slash like a square, which overlaps slightly. There we go. Now that is now ready to go into the oven. I'll slide that in onto that baking stone. It wants to cook for about 25 to 30 minutes, but I've set time for 20, because if it's looking like it's going too dark too quick, then turn the oven temperature down to about 180. Okay, so keep an eye on it. Too hot, turn it down. So here we go. In that goes. There's my kettle. Conveniently my that went on the baking stone, and there we go then. So we'll see what it's like once it's cooked. So after about 15-20 minutes, I turn the temperature down 180. It's then had about another 5-10 minutes, and I think it's done. So I'm going to turn the oven off for now. Now be careful of that baking stone, because remember that is going to be hot. for a long time. So let's just, sounds hollow. So there we have baked with Jack's olive, lemon and thyme rye ring. So it's still too hot yet to cut, so we're going to let it cool completely on the wire rack, and then we'll have a little taster later. Looks interesting. Right, it's not fully cooled yet, but decided couldn't wait any longer. So let's take a chunk out of it. See there, it's nicely packed with olives and that. So, well actually, let's just try it first off without anything else. There's almost like a sweetness coming through. A sweety saltiness, that's the olive. Vegan. Crust isn't too crunchy. If you like it crunchy, I'll leave it in longer. My concern was it was starting to get a bit dark. Not getting a huge hit of lemon. Having said that, wasn't a bit in that bit. So let's try this with a little bit of butter. Whoops, he says getting butter everywhere, including over his celery and everything else. To be honest, I think actually I prefer it better than anything else. The overwhelming hit, remember this is a rye bread, but it's not a huge amount of rye in it. That's partly because you don't want too much rye because it's going to be a bit dense. But you've got lemon, a hint of that. Thyme I think is starting to come through a bit, but overwhelmingly it's olive. But I'll have to enjoy some of that later with a bit of soup.